Senator David Perdue is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Republican from Georgia, and joining us on the phone from Brunswick, Georgia. Senator, thank you very much for being with us.
Well, thanks, Steve. I hope you're well.
Your reaction to the announcement that these talks will continue until July 7th?
Well, I'm troubled, but I'm not surprised. Yet again, we've been our expectations have been we've been disappointed. Steve, I've made 2 trips to the Middle East since January. The first, I visited Israel and had a private one-on-one meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. We had a substantive meeting in his home, and the primary topic of conversation was the prospects of a nuclear Iran and what that meant to the region and the world. The second trip, we went to Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, Jordan, and Israel again. And there are 3 things that I think are contributing to this global crisis. I want to put the Iran situation in perspective. The first is the rise of these traditional rivals, Russia and China. The second is the rise of ISIS. And then third, and I think most dangerous, frankly, is the prospect of having a nuclear Iran. With their violations of the UN Security Council's resolutions, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, their support of terrorism, their missile development program, and now their nuclear development program, I just don't think we can allow Iran to become a nuclear weapon state now or in 10 years or ever. I'm troubled by the fact that the president, and we don't know what's in this potential agreement yet, Steve, but I'm troubled by the president's own remarks where he said that the breakout time for Iran to get to a nuclear weapon after 10 to 13 years is down to 0. And I have a real problem with that, and I think most people do. I'm encouraged that Congress and the president accepted in law, did not veto it, the fact that Congress now has the oversight responsibility for any deal. And I agree with the president in his public statement. I don't want a bad deal. So if it means a little bit of delay to get a good deal, that's fine. But we've been caving in to the Iran negotiation positions consistently since this started. And I think now we really need to take a hard line. I'm also troubled, Steve, by the fact that there's an incentive here for Iran that if we get a deal, that we will release about close to $150 billion of sanctions relief. Put that in perspective. They spend a little less than $20 billion right now on their military expenditures, from what I've seen publicly, and we don't know what they're spending on terrorist support. But we know they support Assad. We know they support Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis. So these are bad actors. They're very involved in terrorism around the world, and I don't think we can trust them on this nuclear deal. And I'm very hopeful that we can get a deal that will preclude them from ever becoming a nuclear weapon state.
But let me follow up on that front, Senator, because as you indicated, the president today saying he would not agree to a bad deal, and Secretary of State Kerry insisting that these outside inspectors, if there is an agreement, will be able to verify that Iran is keeping its promises. Do you not trust the outside inspectors? Do you not trust Iran? Where is the breakdown?
Well, the AEIA, has said repeatedly, first of all, the Perdue facility, which is where they one of their nuclear enrichment facilities, operated for years without our inspectors or the international inspectors knowing that it existed. The second part that troubles me about that, Steve, is the fact that the leadership over there already has said no inspections on military installations. And so the constraints that they're putting on our inspectors is really very disheartening. It's very troubling. So, no, I don't have a lot of confidence that an inspection regime is going to be able to do that. I think it's a combination, as we heard in testimony in the last few weeks in the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Corker, the chairman, and Senator Cardin, the ranking member, have done a great job bringing a lot of professionals in to explain to us about inspections, about what would be included, and so forth. And they're telling us that, if somebody wants to really hide it from us, that it's very difficult to detect through inspections, and therefore our intelligence effort has to be maintained to keep some hope for the detection of illicit activity. But we know they've done it through the inspection protocol we've had over the last decade or so.
Senator Perdue, having been to the region, what do you think is more important for Iran, continuing its nuclear program or getting relief from the economic sanctions which have crippled its economy?
Well, if you look at their citizens, their economy was hurt by our sanctions until we released part of them as we moved into these negotiations. But the banking and the energy and the other sanctions that we had on them really brought them to the table in the first place. The release of some of those sanctions has actually caused them to be less workable, frankly, in these negotiations. Their economy was in tatters. We know that there is a danger to their regime. They have a modern population, an educated population, and frankly, one that is not ignorant about civilization, Western civilization, and so forth. So I think they've got to find a balance, personally, between investing in their economy and securing stability and pursuing any of these military activities. Frankly, I would hope that they would take the route of the domestic investment and back off this intent that they seem to have of wanting to have a nuclear weapon.
And finally, the new deadline is July 7th, and you and other lawmakers will be back in Washington next week. Is that the firm deadline from your standpoint?
Well, at some point, we're going to have to pull the plug and put the sanctions back on these guys. I mean, I don't know what caused them to miss this. That's not a public discussion. But at some point, we have to tell them that there is a true end date at which time these sanctions will become a reality again, to really see if we can get this thing pulled across the line. Now, I don't want a bad deal. I'd rather have no deal and go back to sanctions. And by the way, the rhetoric out there that we only have two options, a deal or war, I don't subscribe to that. I don't accept that. I think that we have proven that we can impact that economy and the thinking and the actions of that regime by our sanction program. That sanction regime was very effective. And I do believe that, frankly, at July 7th, that we should hold true to that. We should reinstitute the sanctions and see if we can get them to be reasonable about this whole issue.
Republican Senator David Perdue is joining us from Brunswick, Georgia. He is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Thank you very much for being with us.
Steve, thank you. I appreciate your work.